Hi everyone, Christina here. Welcome to another card video at my YouTube channel and blog. Today I have a very time-consuming and lengthy card video for you, but I hope it's entirely worth it. The reason it took so long to create was because the entire watercolor background that I have on the card was made by hand. I didn't use any stamps or stencils or dies or anything like that to do this watercolor piece. But I did want to show you every step that I took to accomplish this background so that you could do it on your own. It's actually quite easy and it's just a little bit time consuming. So the first thing I did was I took some watercolor paper that is cut to 5.5 by 7.5, and I made some horizontal lines that are 1 1/4 apart from each other. So I just measured that 1 1/4 going all the way down and then made some lines using my T-square ruler. Now I'm just making an arbitrary diagonal line. There's no real angle for this line. It's just the angle that I chose. And then I used the width of my ruler to make some parallel lines compared to that first diagonal line. So I'm just using the edge of my ruler and lining it up with the drawn lines and then drawing another line to the right. And that's going to make sure that all of my lines are at the exact same diagonal angle, and also that they're evenly spaced apart. So after I had it kind of going one direction, I turned my paper around and went the other direction. And then I'm going to create another diagonal line that cuts off those lines that I've already drawn. So it's a little bit hard to see right here, but basically I'm taking those intersecting points along the horizontal line and I'm lining them up so that it creates triangle shapes going all the way across the watercolor paper. It will make more sense when I tip it in the light and you'll be able to see a little bit better. But basically, I'm just connecting all of those points where the diagonal line met the horizontal line. And then you achieve this really cool triangle pattern. So I've taped my watercolor piece down to a board. This is going to prevent it from warping and causing any strange leveling issues on the watercolor paper while I watercolor. The paints I'm using today are from American Journey. You can buy these at cheapjoes.com. And I put the paints inside a Magello Perfect Color palette. It's a really, really fantastic palette. It cleans up nicely. It doesn't stain, at least not with these paints. I haven't noticed any staining. So I wanted to show you my process of mixing my colors before I start my initial painting. I wanted to create sort of like a grayed down turquoise color. So I took the turquoise and added kind of an orangey red color, and that mutes it down quite a bit. It still leaves it a little bit more of a turquoise color, but it makes it so it's a little more subdued. I also took this yellow kind of ochre shade and added a little bit of an orange, and that brightens it up just a tiny bit as well. I then took a red shade, and I'm going to use this one pretty close to what's already there. I'm not going to mix too much into it, but I'm going to grab another red that's slightly more violet, and I'm going to add a more blue to it. I want it to be even more purple, but I'm adding a very kind of warm blue because I want it to be more of a warm purple. And I really love how this shade turned out, and I might have to use this some more in future paintings because this purple is really, really pretty. So after I had all of my shades picked out, it was time to start painting onto these triangles. Now, I'm going to warn you, a lot of this is going to be sped up. In fact, it's 8 times as fast as I did it in real life. And I had to do this while I edited this video because this painting actually took an hour to create, just this initial layer of paint. I was being very careful to make sure that all of those points on the triangles were nice and precise. And I also wanted to mix different shades of the colors as I painted. So you'll notice out at the bottom I had some different shades of the blue and teal, and I've got some gold and yellow going into more of some red shades. Basically what I'm doing is after I paint each color, I'll mix it with just another color just slightly to change the shade so that each one of these colors kind of relate to each other. You'll notice I have a green on there now, and I really didn't have green in my palette on my when I was mixing colors. But when I mixed that teal with the gold shade, with the kind of the yellow ochre shade, I got more of that green. So I just want to make sure that as I'm adding colors onto these triangles, that each shade next to each other sort of relate. So I won't ever put like a red right next to a blue without having something in between where those two colors are mixed. At this point, I wasn't sure if I really liked this background. It was a little bit too plain, so I actually let it dry overnight, and I came back the next morning hoping to have a better idea of what I wanted to do with the painting. I wanted to salvage that hour that I'd already invested into the piece. So coming back with fresh eyes, which is what I really recommend if you're ever stuck, is to just let the project sit for a little bit and then come back. I had the idea overnight to add additional triangles over the top and have them be offset so that they create a kind of a second layering of a pattern on top. So I kind of created my own template out of some watercolor paper, and it's the same size as those triangles that are already on there. And I used this little triangle piece to trace on some additional triangles that I'm going to be painting in. So I just added more and more of these triangles, trying to get them kind of spaced out and have it look kind of really asymmetrical. I didn't want it to look really even where the same amount of triangles are on the top layer as below. So then I took some more of those shades. The paints had dried on my palette overnight, so I just used a little bit of water to reactivate the paints. And I added 3 more triangles. This is just to give a little bit more interest and have those sheer colors showing through. And oh, I'm sorry, I did 4 colors. I added a gold at the bottom. Now I'm going to bring in some Finetec Pearl colors. This is the gold set. I'm going to use really, really pretty gold color. It's the 4th one down that you can see on screen right now. And I just painted in the rest of those triangles. This is going to give this a very iridescent pearl gold look to this entire piece. And at this point, I'm like, oh, okay, now I'm really liking this, because I think I needed to have a little bit of that shimmer and shine, and also just having it offset worked out beautifully. Added some smaller triangles just to be a little bit different, and actually on the finished card you're really not going to see the smaller triangles too much, but I really did enjoy having them there while I was working on the piece. So you can see how much that Finetec gold paint really shimmers in the light. It's really beautiful. I used my heat tool to speed up the drying process, and then I removed it from the board and cut it down to 4 3/4 wide by 6 3/4 tall. This is going to be slightly smaller than a 5x7 card, and I really didn't want to lose much of the pattern, and that's why I ended up making a 5x7 card. Now I'm going to use the Stitch Circles dies from Simon Says Stamp and the Birthday Script die from Mama Elephant. I just wanted to make sure those were at the size I wanted. And I'm cutting out a circle out of the kind of upper center area of my watercolor piece. And I'm going to have that birthday die span all the way across that circle. I wanted the gold to match on the die that goes on the background, so I created my own gold watercolor cardstock to die cut that birthday script die out of. So I did a couple layers of this gold shade. Actually, I did 1 layer, let it dry, and then painted another layer on top just to make sure it was very saturated. And then I took some Stick It adhesive paper. This is a very, very thin adhesive sheet that can go on the back of your cardstock. And then when you die cut it, you already have adhesive on the entire back of that die cut cardstock. So I'm adding a small area of that Stick It adhesive, and I'll press that down. And then I'm bringing over to my die cut machine. This is the Sizzix Big Shot. And I'll put my birthday script die down onto that gold watercolored piece and then run that through my Big Shot. I'll run it through once and then twice just to make sure that it cuts through everything. The watercolor paper is quite thick, and it also has that additional adhesive layer on the back. So I just wanted to make sure that everything was cut out perfectly. So I then popped the die cut out of that watercolor paper and then took the center areas of the letters out as well. So you can see that as it spans across that die cut circle, all the gold is going to match, and it looks really beautiful on top of that circle. So for the background behind the circle, I took another piece of watercolor paper and I traced that circle window that I've cut, because I want to make sure that as I do this watercolor piece for the background, that it's going to completely go across that shape. So after I taped that down to a board, I erased my circle because I basically knew how big I needed to have my watercolor area be. And then I went back to my watercolor palette and I mixed up some more of this purple shades to put on top. So I did a couple layers of purple with drying it with my heat tool in between. I just wanted to make sure that I had a nice depth of color, and different layers of purple will achieve this. I dabbed off some areas with a paper towel and added more color on top. And then I took a paintbrush and flicked on some water droplets. I dried that with my heat tool, and then I removed it from my board, and I was able to move on with the rest of the card. I love how the purple shades really bring out the purple in that triangle background, and it also gives me a nice dark background to have this birthday die cut on top. So at this point, I thought, you know what? I'm practically making a shaker card. I might as well just go for it and make a shaker card completely. So I added some adhesive to the outside of that circle window on the back of the watercolor piece, and then put a piece of acetate on top. The plastic I'm using today is a window plastic from Lifestyle Crafts or We Are Memory Keepers, and this is a really great acetate to use on your cards. I then took some foam adhesive and folded it back on itself so it was 2 layers, and then cut it up the middle so that it was more narrow. I removed the release paper on both sides of this foam tape, and by doing so, this allows me to stretch and manipulate this foam to the shape of a circle. Since I've started using this method for creating shaker cards by removing the backing on both sides of the foam tape, this has greatly diminished any of my frustrations with making shaker cards. It's one of my most recommended tips. If you ever do shaker cards, please try the foam tape doubled back on itself and then the release paper removed. I'm now using some sequins from Little Things by Lucy. Lucy's Little Things, I always mess up the name on this, but check out the supply list below to see the exact shade that I used. Some of you were asking how you can prevent the sequins from sticking to the edges of the foam tape. One way you can do that is you could use a powder tool before you put the sequins in. I didn't do that today. But the other method is something I did today, and that is when I put the sequins in, I tried to keep them away from the edges. And then when I put that watercolor piece, the purple piece down, I made sure to really press down and seal all the edges of that foam before I turned over the shaker area. This makes sure that that foam tape is really adhered to the cardstock and also to the acetate really securely, and it kind of gets rid of any bubble areas where it might stick. So I created a white card base out of some marshmallow cardstock from Bazzill. This is a 5x7 card and it has a side fold. So I just put more foam tape on the back of my shaker area so that everything would lay flat, and I pressed that down onto the card base. I then removed the release paper on my birthday die cut and used some tweezers to adhere that down onto the shaker area. I'm now going to use the Happy and Smile stamp set from Simon Says Stamp, and I stamped the word happy onto some Licorice Twist cardstock from Bazzill in Versamark ink. I then applied some Wow embossing powder in the color Rich Pale Gold and heat set that with my heat tool until it was nice and smooth. These gold colors aren't exact matches, but they're close enough, and the happy is such a small area compared to the rest of the gold on the card that is not a huge deal. Then put some foam tape on the back of that happy and put it down onto the card. So this is going to finish the card for today. In total, this card took me over 2.5 hours to complete. This was definitely a labor of love. You guys know me, I generally do more simple cards that can be completed in a shorter amount of time, usually no more than maybe 40 or 45 minutes. So this was definitely a card that I had to put some time into. Hope you guys enjoyed today's card. I will see you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching.